Well, I think Parliamentary Review does something very interesting. It provides a platform for people to share and express their views, and I hope we're going to be able to build on that even more so that people can interconnect with each other. But it also gives an opportunity for parliamentarians to know that people are taking interest in what they're doing and how they're doing it.
Hello and welcome to the Parliamentary Review podcast, the podcast that takes a fine-tooth comb to leadership. I'm Jonathan White, and in each episode I'm joined by directors, CEOs, CFOs, government ministers, chairmen, presidents, maybe one day even the Prime Minister themselves. Not that we quite know who that might be as of yet. The aim is to discover who these people are, the people who get up each morning and make Britain work. We learn about the job gains and losses, the bonuses paid out to the bosses, and the aim is to discover who these people are, the people who get up each morning and make Britain work. We learn about the job gain and losses. The aim is to discover who these people are, the people who get up each morning and make Britain work. We learn about the job gains and losses, the bonuses paid out to the bosses, and of course the innovation and success that make it all worthwhile in the end. We also get their take on the current political and economic state of the country. Later in this episode, you'll have the chance to hear our exclusive interview with Lord Blunkett, former Home Secretary, former Education Secretary, and of course the current co-chairman of the Parliamentary Review. But for now, we're joined by Tom O'Hagan, the CEO and founder of Virtual One. Established over a decade ago here in central London, Virtual One has evolved from being a local operator and network aggregator to a UK-wide carrier with the fifth largest UK network, connecting the digital services that make UK businesses work. At a time when people speak of a disconnect between parts of our country, there probably isn't a better person nor company to talk to about that. Their background ensures they understand the importance of the country having the technological infrastructure to keep us connected together and to compete with the world. Tom founded the business in 2007, and it didn't take long for Virtual One to disrupt the market, now operating shoulder to shoulder with the likes of BT and Vodafone. Tom, welcome.
Hi Jonathan, thank you for having me.
Great. It's been a good 6 months, Tom, I think, since Virtual One was in the review. I think the listeners would appreciate to know what's been happening with the company since they appeared in the document.
Well, we've been very busy rolling out our national network into 180 towns and cities across the UK, which is something that we've recently finished. So that's been a really exciting journey for us.
Fantastic.
And as part of that, we've been obviously signing up lots and lots of new customers and growing our business at the same time, as well as a sort of product set to match in to the national network offering that we've now got. And I think we might touch on this a little bit later, but obviously fibre is quite a hot topic in the industry at the moment,
yes.
And we really believe that we are helping companies on that journey and migrating away from legacy copper infrastructure onto more reliable and faster fibre connections.
I mean, it certainly is something we will talk about later, and I can only imagine that Virtual One was set up in 2007, over 10 years ago now. The change that has occurred in the market and how you deal with your customers and the infrastructure you deal with on a day-to-day basis must be a world of difference now.
Oh, it's completely different. I mean, when I first set the business up, their portals didn't exist, for example, and when you wanted to get a quote from somebody, you were literally relying on email and weeks for it to be turned around. And of course, nowadays it's very different. And Virtual One actually created the first portal in the UK marketplace for resellers and customers to go onto and to be able to get fibre quotes within 30 seconds anywhere in the whole of the UK. So it's changed enormously, and the world we live in today is much more of a digital world where, I think for why we are growing so quickly is because we make the difficult things so easy. And what I mean by that is being able to get a quote on the portal, to be able to order your fibre service straight away, to be able to get all the updates via the portals. Once it's in and live, you can change the bandwidth, change the services on there. 10 years ago, nothing like that was, never existed. It was a pipe dream.
And I think, as you've said before, Tom, central to your achievement, really, and making sure Virtual One carried this out, was really changing what used to be a paper-driven market.
Yeah, very much so. It's nowadays all about automation and self-serve and making it really easy for the customer to do business with you. And we have a complete laser focus on that, and we're very, very good at it. But it's all digitalisation.
And on that point, I know that just in the last 12 months, you've been nominated for and won at the Tech Marketing and Innovation Awards. I think it was the Comms Dealer Sales and Marketing Awards. Recognition like this often comes down to the values a company has, and I think everyone would like to know what are those values at Virtual One that helped make it the success it is today.
Well, and just the other day we picked up another Best Companies to Work For award, which I think was the third one actually that we won this year.
Oh, and, congratulations!
Thank you. And we featured in the Sunday Times Top 100 Companies to Work For as well, which was, and that's really a cornerstone of our mission. Is to, number one is to be the best company to work for in the UK. Mm-hmm. Number two is to have a Net Promoter Score of plus 60, and number three is our results. And it's really, really simple. Look after your people will look after your customers, and that drives your results.
And I think that when anyone would look at Virtual One, they can see that in practice. And I think I'm right in saying, Tom, your background has always been in working with the international carrier market. Virtual One was very much your response to the shortcomings of that market. Tell us a bit about that, and when it was you realised that the market had to change.
Well, I've been in telecoms now for 20 years next year. It makes me feel really old, actually.
Especially when you see everyone else young joining, I bet. But
but I mean, the whole how I came up with Virtual One. I used to work for Telstra, who we kind of think of the Aussie version of BT, and I wanted to create a different platform and that was a different way of doing business for channel companies in the UK to buy telecom services. And typically, the reseller market would buy from one operator. And the issue when you used to do that was you'd only have access to their network and their product portfolio. And that's the gap in the market that I was trying to fill, saying actually I can build a platform that gives organisations access to all the operators in the UK with all the different technologies, but we're the ISP and we own the value. And it was a really different model back in 2007. And then, as I was talking about earlier, some of the problems that we've solved when I first started the business was just thinking about what's difficult in this industry and what can we streamline, make really easy for our customers.
And speaking of those difficulties in the market in general, and it's one that, again, has changed so much over the years, what are the major internal challenges facing the market currently?
I think the biggest issue for us sometimes is dealing with Openreach. I think Openreach is still the national operator that a lot of telecoms companies rely on to build the infrastructure. And they have got a lot better in the last few years. And for example, we've automated all of our process and systems into Openreach, and they used to have a really, really bad name, but they've got much better over the last few years. And there's lots of different operators popping up now, laying new fibre, and we work with a number of them. But some of the challenges we have as an industry, for example, away leave and dealing with landlords, and that can be quite a bottleneck. That can be frustrating for us and for the end user when we're trying to put fibre in. And I think it's one of the areas actually where legislation can help with code powers, and Ofcom are doing some things around it at the moment. But that's certainly something I'd like to see us collectively get much better at managing as an industry, because ultimately we want to deliver services faster to customers.
Absolutely. And imagine that you just brought it up really about that legislation that could help. I mean, the future of the country's tech infrastructure has certainly been under the magnifying glass more than usual over the last few months, and probably no bad thing either. How do you see the future of it, especially when it comes to fibre and 5G, panning out in the medium term as things stand?
On the fibre side, Openreach are now investing heavily, but actually, in order for them to get to do that, it's taking a number of other operators to come up and start building, which is a little bit frustrating because I think Openreach have had a bit of a slow start, and they've also been trying to sweat the copper asset, I think, for far too long. They are now accelerating forward their plans. I think we've got some fibre cities that they're starting to come out and build, and Virtual One is piggybacking on the back of some of that. And with others, we're working with other operators on that. So I'm really excited about the opportunity that brings, because ultimately everything is going to have to move to fibre and away from legacy copper infrastructure. And the benefit to business and to consumers is outstanding, with the amount of bandwidth we can give people and the things they can do with it is limitless. It really is with fibre.
And I think it was just last week that Openreach were talking about, I think it was their community fibre partnerships, which is helping to co-fund the cost of upgrading so much of the infrastructure, especially to more rural communities. I think there is a slight fear that, and given what Virtual One does, working across so much of the country, that there might become a horrific sort of urban-rural split in terms of this infrastructure, or indeed, I think, just as some people might fear, just London and the rest of the country. But I'm sure, given what you do, you know that hopefully that won't be true, especially since I think it was 180 towns and cities you said, wasn't it, Tom?
Yeah, we're in 180 towns and cities, that's right. I mean, I think London has an awful lot of fibre in the ground already, and I don't think there's a problem in London. We've got lots of competition in London, but certainly, as you rightly point out, there potentially is a danger in some areas, because big companies want a return on their investment. I think there are a number of operators that operate in the rural space, GigaClear being one of them, who have done that extremely well, where they're bringing fibre broadband out into the Cotswolds, for example, where Openreach just wouldn't go out and build. So I think what you're seeing is a number of other different alternative providers popping up who can see that they can make a return on it and pump fibre into those particular areas.
Excellent. Now, and in terms of, there's some great examples there then of what it is the market is doing for the future. If you were Secretary of State for the day, you had one policy you could implement. What is it you would be? What is it that government can do at the moment that would really help along the industry?
That is a very good question.
Putting you on the spot, I know. I suppose before you can probably think of 1,000 things they could do to help. So
I could. I think the part of the challenge with fibre has been to get Openreach to accelerate their plans, and also the funding for. So I think there's. Can I give you two things? Is that
please go on. I'll take a mark off at the end. You can give.
So the first one I would do is figure out a way to allow Openreach to accelerate their plans from where they are at the moment, because ultimately a lot of the UK telecoms market relies on Openreach delivering fibre quickly and ubiquitously to all areas, and I think that just has to happen regardless of the cost, because it will come back long term, and I think for the economy it is by far the right thing to do.
Yes, I think you're absolutely right, because there's also people I think can tend to forget that it is all relative. Our infrastructure needs to be as good, not as our own, but as our neighbours, as Europe's, as South Korea's, as Japan's, as America's. And so, I think you're spot on with that, I think.
Yeah, very much. And then the second part I would do is there is some funding at the moment, but I don't think it's enough, and it's releasing money out to new or existing organisations that have the capability and the customers to go out and build more fibre infrastructure around the UK in competition with Openreach, because I still don't believe they have enough of it.
Yeah, I think it was Ofcom's report last year, the communications market report, that I think it was 16 million of the 27 million households in the UK had moved to super fast broadband, and I think there was some fear though that the rate might be slowing. And
the other bit is super fast is not necessarily full fibre. Exactly. And there's a big difference between the two. You know, I can talk from my own house where I had a fibre to the cabinet connection, which is called super fast, and you might be getting 30, 40 meg, which sounds a lot. It really isn't. And you know, I put a full fibre to the Prem circuit in, and we now have a gig, and the difference is just unbelievable. And I think when you're working at home and you want to run multiple applications, or most importantly, when your children want to watch Peppa Pig, it downloads extremely quickly, and the quality is amazing. Or if you're downloading a movie from Netflix, you know, it'll take you 1.5 seconds.
Absolutely, and it will make all the difference. And again, I think there is this worry that if we're falling behind, if only 7 to 10% have the fibre optic infrastructure, you know, you can look at competing economies that are well over 50% now. I suppose the question is, how long can we wait until we try and catch up? Perhaps not long.
We can't wait, and that's why my two things are get on with it now.
Absolutely. Now, speaking of, I suppose, government getting on with things, we're talking at a pretty, I would say, unusual time in British politics. We don't know if or when we're going to leave the European Union. We don't quite know who the Prime Minister is going to be in 3 weeks' time. It's easy, I think, to throw your hands up and despair. Has the last, really, because it's been 2 years since the referendum result, to be specific, 3 years, have you noticed a lack of confidence either in the market or in investing because as a result of this sort of political malaise we find ourselves in?
I think in this industry specifically, no. You know, I think we have some customers that saying they might not do things because they're waiting to see the outcome, but it isn't too many. And you know, I think the bigger challenge for us as a business with Brexit is that uncertainty.
Yes.
And you know, I think the pound and the euro taking a hammering is not helpful, especially when we buy so much equipment as an industry, typically in dollars. And that's pretty painful. And also you know, we rely on people from Europe coming in who have excellent skills to help, in particular on the software side for certain things. And you know, that is a concern until we get clarity. And I think all we need is clarity on what is happening, because I really believe us as British people and Britain, we just need to know, and then we get on with it. That's what we do.
And I think you speak for such a huge majority of the country, where no matter how they voted or campaigned, 3 years ago, we need to move on and we need clarity. And I think that is coming from all corners of business and every sector. Often, I think there's a lot of people have said that often in our history, when the times like this, we often have a leader that comes forward and that's very good. And I think politics could learn perhaps a couple of things from business at the minute and business leaders in being practical and people. Is there something perhaps you think that politics could learn from the business world at the moment?
I think being practical, and once you've made a decision, stick to it. And it's common sense. A lot,
Yes.
I always think a lot of things are common sense, and sometimes in politics you don't see common sense.
Quite. I think that's been true since time immemorial, I think. But now, in terms of and you picked up on it already, the issue of especially when it comes to your industry, a lot of people from Europe coming over to work because they've got the skill sets. Would I be right in thinking that even when we leave the European Union, you would be quite content so long as we have a fair and equitable visa program with the European Union that would make sure that if you had the skill sets that you needed, you could come here, you could get here, and you could work here. And I assume that would be a happy result for everybody.
Yeah, I completely agree. We just don't want to see that made really difficult.
Yes, and the last thing you need is more paperwork.
Yeah, precisely. And also, I think one of the things that I really enjoy about being part of Europe at the moment is that we have, free travel and we can go abroad and it's not an issue. I would have a bit of a problem if I've got to start filling paperwork out to go on my summer holiday to Spain.
I think a lot of people would, or indeed a booze cruise to Calais. But when you mentioned earlier, obviously you've been in the business now for 20 years. What would you say to younger people that are looking to start their own careers in your industry? I don't mean sort of post-university, but 15-year-olds, 16-year-olds.
Yeah, I think this industry is the fastest moving. It's the most exciting, or one of the most exciting in the UK PLC. It's constantly changing. It's constantly evolving. You can always learn new things. You can learn great skills in this market, and it's great fun, and it's growing, and it's not going away.
Fantastic. And if you did have any advice for kids looking to get into the business?
Getting into IT and tech.
Sorry, I'll start. Yeah, I'll ask you again. Sorry, Tom. Yeah, and if you did have any advice to kids looking to get started in the industry at the moment?
I think the world is their oyster in a minute. The coding is the future. And I think we have in schools now, they're teaching coding. Software is the future. There's lots and lots of opportunity in technology. As I said before, it's very exciting. My advice would be go for it.
Excellent. Well, Tom, it's been a pleasure chatting. Thank you very much for joining us. And Tom, we'll speak again before long, I hope. Right? Great stuff.
Thank you very much. See you soon.
Goodbye.
Bye now.
I hope you all enjoyed our chat with Tom, and especially learning more about the importance of the country's digital infrastructure. I'll certainly have to check to see whether our office's internet connection are up to scratch. I have a feeling they might not be. If you haven't heard it before, coming up now is our conversation with the Parliamentary Review's co-chairman, David Blunkett. Lord Blunkett served as Home Secretary and Education Secretary in Tony Blair's cabinet before receiving a peerage in 2015. Outside of politics, he's the Vice President of the Royal National Institute of Blind People and National Alzheimer's Society. And when he has the time, he can be found cheering on his team, Sheffield Wednesday. I hope you enjoy listening as much as I enjoyed speaking to David. Here it is now. We're now joined by Lord Blunkett. Thank you very much for joining us.
You're very welcome.
Now, it would probably be remiss of me if I didn't start, given the recent events in Parliament. I didn't ask you, given your 32 years in that place, about your thoughts regarding the unprecedented situation I think the public are looking at the minute.
Well, I think I see it very much like Joe Public. I see it as though I'm looking at something that is made up, that is scripted, that is like almost a sci-fi film where anything can happen and then anything does happen. And I'm very sad about that because I think that it's damaged our parliamentary democracy. I think that it's brought politics into disrepute, and I think it's created anger on all sides, whether people were strongly in favour of remaining or whether they were, as we call them, Brexiteers.
Absolutely. And given that situation, whether it's going to be a general election, many people are beginning to worry about
apathy taking effect?
Well, I'm worried about two things. Apathy in the respect of turnout and whether people vote, and anger and, if you like, the friction developed into a failure to be able to have a democratic dialogue, so that the respect that we have for each other, that the way in which we debate issues is often now broken down, and there's abuse in the street, not just of people because they're considered to be different or foreign, but because people recognize they have a different point of view. Now, that is new. I've been around in formal politics now for, goodness, almost all my adult life, because I was elected to a local authority in my city of Sheffield when I was 22. And I've never seen that. I've seen people get very annoyed, and that's fine, and people should get angry, but I've never experienced them display it in such personal venom before. And we need to calm that, because our democracy depends on people being able to have genuine disagreements and differences and to work them through the political process. Otherwise, we fall, as history teaches us, into the hands of extremists.
Absolutely. And given that you've just said what you just said, a lot of people are talking now about whether the party structure, which does exist at the minute, it can survive. We've seen both the Labour Party and the Conservative Party showing signs of buckling.
I think the political system the party system will survive. It may have a very rocky time in the near future, but I think it'll right itself. But it will only do that if political parties themselves sort out what's going on internally. I think both major parties have been, to use an old phrase, infiltrated. Came across a prominent minister just outside the cabinet whose current chair of their Conservative Association was the UKIP candidate against him back in 2015. We know about the challenges within the Labour Party and the way in which people who were thrown out of the party have either been able to or are seeking to rejoin. And so we've got this two-ender, if you like, the bread in the two sides of the sandwich coming together, and the middle is being squeezed. Now, there's academic work to say that actually the electorate aren't all that keen on centre parties, particularly at the moment. And I think we need to be wary of believing that the creation of some sort of centrist party in Britain would solve the problem. It would temporarily, but it wouldn't resolve the differences that people have and how we work them through.
A lot of people have been suggesting recently that the only way out of this situation is with a second referendum. And I'm right in saying that you have quite reluctantly come to that position yourself.
It took me a very long time to come to the conclusion that we would need an affirmative vote. I resisted it because I come from and represented an area deeply disaffected, feeling the effects of deindustrialization and then the austerity measures on the back of the global meltdown, and felt in my bones, which is why I wasn't one of those who thought we were easily going to win the referendum for Remain in 2016, that you need to deal with the underlying problems and causes of that disaffection. And the simple slogan, "They didn't hear you the first time, tell them again," could be very effective, a kind of Trumpian slogan that could be adopted by those who are very, very vehement Brexiteers. However, I think given the state that we're in, I came to the conclusion a few weeks ago, and I wrote in the Daily Telegraph, that I think the only way to deal with this is to get an agreement for this interim period, because that's what it is, a transition from where we are to where we might be, and then put that to the British people. And if the British people don't like that negotiated agreement, either Theresa May's original or something that emerges from the discussions and the debate and the toing and froing between the two major parties, put that to the electorate and give them a chance 3 years on from 2016 to make a new choice as to whether that's what they want to go for, that's the direction they want to take, or whether they'd like to take a step back and remain in the European Union.
And do you think that the people of Sheffield that did vote leave many of whom voting for the first time in decades or the first time ever. Do you think that they would feel maybe slightly frustrated at the call for a second vote?
Yes, I think they would. And I think we just have to be really honest about that. There would be a great deal of frustration, bordering on anger, people saying, we gave you the message, why didn't you just do it? And we have to be straight with them. The reason it's been complex, the reason it's taken this time, the reason that we are in the undoubted mess we're in, is because it wasn't simple. You didn't, as some people thought, sign a bit of paper and walk away. This is a complex, interconnected, economically, socially, in terms of our trade and our relationships, not just within the European Union, but with the European Union's agreements across the world. This is a complex issue. And to pretend otherwise is not to give people what they want. It's to patronize them and say, yes, we don't think you were wrong. We don't think that you got it wrong when you thought it was a simple way out. I think you just have to be straight with them, and they'll be angry. I mean, people are angry with me when I walk around in my own constituency and say, what are you up to? And I say, I'm up to trying to speak the truth. I'm up to trying to say it as it is, as I always have done.
Absolutely. Now, given all of that, one would expect the governing party to perhaps be somewhere between 20 points and to 30 points behind the opinion polls, but they are not. There has been an awful lot of criticism of the leadership of the opposition regarding that. Would you have any advice for the leadership of your party?
Well, I think belatedly, from the beginning of April, the two parties realised that they were going to sink separately if they didn't actually try and make an effort and at least display some endeavour to work together. I think had there been two different leaders post-2016 referendum, this would have happened a great deal earlier. It hasn't, but it can now. And it is remarkable that in the circumstances that the government have found themselves, not just in not being able to get the kind of deal that some people wanted, not even being able to hold all their party together, but actually being totally riven publicly with cabinet responsibility having broken down, to find themselves only marginally behind, or even on opinion polls through March, marginally in front of the Labour Party is astonishing. And once this period is over, I think Labour will need to take a very long, hard look at why the British people have not turned, as they often do, to what is called Her Majesty's opposition. There are very complex reasons for that, including the fact that the leadership of the party have only realised, I think, very, very recently, that you have to reach out to people whose views you don't agree with, and you have to win them over to something more than what the issues and the policies and the ideology you thought of in the first place.
And on that point, you'll be aware, certainly, that the Parliamentary Review itself has been dedicated to showcasing leadership in all its forms across the country. Now, speaking to many of our contributors, they have made clear that they do feel that leadership has been lacking, both from the government and opposition, as you've said. In your many years in politics, is there a time in certainly recent history where there has been perhaps a leadership vacuum like we're seeing today?
I think we find in Britain an interesting paradox. People want strong leaders, but they want leaders that listen and are responsive. And the two don't always go together. I've lived through the period of both Margaret Thatcher and Tony Blair, two leaders who knew what they wanted to do and were prepared to put it on the line. I've lived through Ted Heath and John Major, who were less clear. Ted Heath on Europe, yes, but not on much else. John Major really trying to mop up after the controversial and divisive Thatcher era, where they showed a different style of leadership. Now, they were portrayed as being weak. I don't think that's always the case. I think that you can have leaders who are very clear what they want to do, but to turn on its head the Marxist slogan, speak softly and walk with a big stick. They can actually do the job clearly and decisively. Clem Attlee was such a person, and in many ways so is Harold Macmillan. And those are the kind of leaders where you don't get bombast, you don't get, I know best and I'm going to push this through, but you actually get someone who can genuinely create a coalition of the willing, but has a clear idea about their values. And I hope we'll return to that.
Absolutely. And I think one of the strengths of the review has always been its sense of bipartisanship. Well,
I think Parliamentary Review does something very interesting. It provides a platform for people to share and express their views, and I hope we're going to be able to build on that even more so that people can interconnect with each other. But it also gives an opportunity for parliamentarians to know that people are taking interest in what they're doing and how they're doing it, and therefore to get the message that they've got to reflect outwards. We need both. We need the input into the system. We need voices. We need ideas. We need experiences through Parliamentary Review inwards. But we also need to ensure that the way in which our politics works is reflected outwards, so that people firstly understand how the system works. Secondly, the complexity and difficulty of it. And thirdly, the way in which they need to tell us, I mean, I'm in the upper house now, but to tell us as parliamentarians what they think and where we're going wrong, and for us to listen.
Absolutely. And on that point, you've been in public service for most of your life, Lord Blunkett, ever since Sheffield City Council. I mean, in that time, what are the key lessons you think you've learned in the best way for policymakers and those at the coalface to communicate and work together?
I've learned that actually there is enormous wisdom out there, and if you're prepared to engage and to listen, then your views might actually change. Mine have on a number of issues, particularly social issues, what small L liberal issues over the years, going in the opposite direction, it has to be said, to most people as they age. And you need to ensure that you've reached out to sufficient people to create that coalition that allows you to make progress, and that you won't create everything you want and change everything you want for the better overnight. It will never happen. There's no day zero where everything's done and we can all wash our hands of it and that's fine. We build building blocks. We stand, if you like, historically on the shoulders of those who came before us. And if we get that message, we won't be too frustrated when everything doesn't happen immediately, but we'll be determined to make progress, and we'll punish politically, democratically, those who don't.
Absolutely. And perhaps finally, with that concluding point, it's fair to say, as you've already mentioned, a lot of the population are frustrated, no matter how they vote in the referendum or their general political opinions. But perhaps, for those people, is there something you'd point to be optimistic, looking towards the future about?
I think I'm very clear. We're a great nation. We can't just do things on our own. We have to recognise that we live in an incredibly rapidly growing global environment, and the power sources and the power politically has changed over the last 20, 30 years. But we are creative, we are innovative, and we will pull through, and we'll do it because we won't have anyone else to blame anymore if we come out of the European Union, and we'll need to literally pull our socks up and do it ourselves. In the end, my message is clear. Nothing is ever as good as it seems at the time, and nothing is ever as bad. And we've come through difficult times in the past, and we'll come through again.
Lord Blunkett, thank you very much.
Thank you, Jonathan.
As always, it's been a pleasure interviewing and learning from our guests. I hope you've all enjoyed listening. Until next time, I'm off the red line to raise a glass to raising standards. Goodbye.
Thank you very much for listening to our podcast. You can find every episode on iTunes, Spotify, and YouTube. If you'd like to know more about the Parliamentary Review, please visit our website at www.theparliamentaryreview.co.uk.